make education debt-free, pretty much. So as affordable as we can and with the highest quality that we can. I'm looking forward to this chat and answering any question and having a chat with Trent and TJ and of course you, Navi.
Thank you for that. It's actually not sunny here in Toronto as well. But hey, it's October, so it's not raining, it's not super cold. I'll take what I can get.
Yeah.
I'm so happy to have you, Ludo. I've been watching what you all do at New Camp for, I think, like when you came into Mint Bean, I feel
almost
like
a year ago.
yeah, almost a year ago. And I remember like when we first hosted you, and it was like the work that you guys are doing at New Camp, and the fact that the education is so incredibly accessible. You've been one of the first players to kind of make bootcamp programs so incredibly accessible outside of ISAs, which I have a lot of admiration for. So, you've kind of used your experience as like a developer, as an entrepreneur, to really like play with that model and really think about like, hey, how can I, bring this, how can I scale this model and make sure that like people from different diverse backgrounds are able to have a bootcamp education. So thank you for doing the work that you do.
Thank you so much, Navi. Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's been a pleasure. And it's been great
TJ.
partnering with you and your team. Go for it.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I cut you off. I have a terrible habit of doing that. I'm going to try to monitor that. Monarchs told me, he's like, you need to listen better, but I don't know if he says that as a CEO or if he says that as a husband. So we're with the so that's still up in the air. So we don't know if it's just a personality thing or if I need to work on that.
Well, Navi, I don't think, any of us would tell you to quiet down. You've shared so much great information and brought so much, knowledge and advice to the bootcamp community. And, when we first connected as well, it kind of just seemed like one of those things that was too good to be true. Hackathons for bootcamp graduates. Wow. So it's been awesome, working with all of you and the entire, community. And I hate to say it, but we do have some sun here in Orange County right now. I actually have been in tech for over 10 years and surprisingly enough, had that entire time be in the job search and career services space, which is definitely not something, thought I would end up in after graduating with, marketing and finance degree. But here at Learning Fuse, it's your, kind of traditional boot camp. We've been doing this since 2014. We are the oldest program in Orange County, and I believe the only in-person program in California right now. We have a couple different programs: web development, data science, and UX, UI. And most of my role, is around everything except the hands-on teaching. Actually, even though I did take the classes back in 2017. So I know what it's like to go through a boot camp, and it is probably one of the most rewarding experiences and something I definitely wish I could go back through and do again because it is such a unique thing to do in your lifetime. So excited to be here, especially considering that the last couple of times with you, Navi, has been around recruiters, salary negotiation, and now we get to talk about a little bit more of a broad picture.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate the intro, TJ. And one of the things, like we've had so many conversations over the last, I think it's been 2 years since we've been speaking, and you have more than a decade of experience as a recruiter. You told me that I didn't know this until recently, that your parents were also recruiters. So you've been around, that mindset of like what hiring looks like for a very, very long time. And one of the things that I appreciate and admire about you is that you've been kind of like sharing the fact that Learning Fuse is small and nimble, but like one of the approaches, what I love about what you all do is you kind of take a look at what everyone else is doing, and you're not afraid to go, okay, I would love to take that and use that model to make, to make the outcomes team better, or to make career success better. And I actually think that career success is probably one of the most difficult and challenging things to do. I'm a bootcamp grad as well, and the program in itself is easy, right? Because like you're moving through the motions, like you're moving through the motions of instructor time, and then you're moving through the motion of labs. But it's really outside of the program where a lot of people find like their first like challenge of like, what should I build, like where do I go from here, right? So the fact that you work with so many employer partners, the fact that like I see you on LinkedIn on how much support and love that you give to your alumni, and I know how deeply you work with your employer partners as well. So yeah, there's a ton of work that the faculty does that that I feel sometimes we're not really privy to as students.
Thanks, Tabby. That means a lot. I'm not crying yet.
I'll get you there. All right, Trent. I've met you recently, but we've been following each other on LinkedIn for quite a while. I feel like we've had an interaction here and there in the last 2 years, but it hasn't been. We don't deeply know each other yet, but I feel like from our last conversation last Friday, I think we're there.
Yeah, I'd say quietly, I've been sending a number of our alums to you and to your program. And so the relationship has been growing more through the feedback of what they've experienced of your initiatives. And they come back and talk about how positively impacted they were by creating projects, and then also the training. And you mentioned the career success component of it being so essential, them having the project and then also learning how to deploy that within a career development environment. As we know, it's a bit distinct, the coding piece, and then the actual skill set you need in order to get the attention of a recruiter and to have those conversations. So I really appreciate you being able to provide this opportunity. I have Q&As with the alums just about every week, and it's on the headlines when I give the updates about events that are happening. Mint Bean is one of them, de facto. So very proud to see what you've done so far in all of the events. A little bit about me. I've been in education for quite a while. Interestingly, I will mention the University of Phoenix, which was like my very, very first opportunity. Back then, the online model or the bootcamp model or the distance learning or alternative education model was actually quite taboo at that time. So that organization was one of the first to present this, kind of take the risk and say, you can learn outside of a traditional education or traditional environment. And it's really for folks who were working and wanted to career change, career switch. And then I worked there for a couple of years, and I also worked at the Art Institute as a career counselor there. And that model, that Art Institute model, was also in a semi-alternative type of experience. It was a 2-year program concentrating on film and graphic design, web design. So I've had some time where I've been able to see the importance of a non-traditional approach. And now coming into full stack, I've been with the organization since about 2018, 2019, and working with the software devs now. But it's this consistency that I notice where people are starting to realize there are other opportunities or other ways to develop a skill set aside from, and it's not to beat down the traditional path, but it may not be for everyone. And so to be able to present an alternative and to say you can learn a skill, it doesn't have to take 4 to 5 years. You can learn it in months, but there are some particular character traits, strengths, requirements that you need in order to bring to the table in order to do this well. I just like that model. And personally, I'm a learner myself. I like courses and certs and finding ways with which I can use my time efficiently to develop skills. So I think the folks that are here, I mean, you're in the right place where you're thinking of how can I do this in a way that suits me most efficiently.
Yeah, no, I love that so much. One of the things that Trent, like you use a lot of mindset training and conditioning to kind of work with grads post the program. And I like from doing a boot camp program, like I can tell you that there's sort of this like rat race that happens within the cohort. And I don't like, I haven't been in the online model, so I don't know what that looks like for an online system, but I've been in class, and it's like you develop such deep relationships with everybody inside that cohort. And you also sort of start looking at yourself with the same, with like benchmarks, like where are you with the strongest student in the class, or where are you with maybe the weakest student in the class. And then as soon as you graduate, it's almost like, it's like as students get picked up for employers, you start kind of going, okay, well, why am you start kind of being a little bit harder on yourself. Like, why did that person get picked up? Maybe they hadn't done a great job in understanding the material in like week 2 or week 6 or whatever time frame that was, right? And what are some of the techniques that you use to work with your students to get them out of that mindset and to really, you guys have given us so much appreciation for the work that we do with hackathons. And one of the reasons why we really wanted to focus the community on building, like we could have created content, we could have gone down that route where it's like, here's a course, follow this course. But there's so much content there already, right? There's Udemy, there's YouTube, and then there's like all sorts of different courses by influencers that are doing a fantastic job, but we really wanted to focus on the build. But outside of the build, there's a lot of like life work that goes into just the mind shift. So what are some of the techniques that you use?
Yeah, sure. I'll speak to that. One, I think, and it's across the board with all of our coaches, is the practice. We emphasize. I mean, if you think about it, there's the knowledge piece that you're describing, right? So there's the theory, there's the concept, but you really don't know how it operates until you actually do it. And as a very practical example, it's the interview questions. The very first one that everyone here may absolutely love. I presume everyone loves this question. Tell me about yourself, right? If that first question causes anxiety, then we already know that there's a mindset shift that needs to take place, because that's the first question that's going to come up, and that will set the tone for the rest of the dialogue. And your energy, and we know it takes a few seconds to get a vibe from someone. All of these subconscious elements start to pour into the conversation just by responding to that cue. So it's the practice. It's really the exposure. We emphasize a lot, and just getting comfortable with the ambiguity and the comfortability with making mistakes, making an error. The coach is there to support, and eventually you get good, with practice. So you do it more. As with any other skill, the exposure effect helps to reduce the nervousness, the anxiety, and then eventually, ideally, you get to a point where you want to explore this in more unfamiliar environments. So when you then get to the interview, it's not such a surprise. You kind of have it so ingrained in your system. Tell me about yourself. Tell me about yourself. I'm just using that question because that's the first one, but there are a plethora of questions that you can be thrown, and you want to feel comfortable enough to be able to have a confident dialogue. And so I would say the very first one is the practice, getting exposed. And then there's also breathing. I don't want to talk too much, but I would recommend everyone to take a moment to breathe. It's a technique, just really 3 seconds inhalation, 3 seconds exhalation, and that can help you to relax as well. So combination of breath work as well as just exposure can help.
Yeah, no, it sounds silly sometimes, right? Like, oh, like breathe, but it helps so much with, actually, it's funny you talk about tell me about yourself. As an employer, that's one of the first questions that I ask every single candidate that I've ever interviewed, because it's not necessarily you being lazy, but it's what you're looking from as an employer is you're just looking for, hey, where's this person going to take the conversation? What are some things that they're proud of? And tell me about yourself is actually a really heavy question. People don't enjoy talking about themselves. They don't necessarily know how to present themselves in the right light. What are some of the things that they should put spotlight on? And then how to go into almost like a rabbit hole of like, hey, like I've done this, and you as the employer can kind of pick up on those cues and go, let's explore that. You know, you mentioned that you were a translator for 8 years, and or like you were a musician, and that's such an interesting thing when you're transitioning into software development, because you're using the same logic, so the same side of your brain that you would in creating a lot of these applications. So yeah, tell me about yourself is the first question that I would work on. And I feel that there's a lot of purpose that you have to work with in order to get that right. So thank you for that. Ludo, let's go back to the question of what boot camps excel at. Let's start from there. So what would you say that the boot camp grad out when they're done the program, like what are some of the, let's go with top three. What are some top three things that why should we hire them?
Yeah. I'll start with one of the reasons why most people are here is, at first, when it all started, Bootcamp really excelled at really giving people a dream of a better life. I mean, that promise that you can really change careers and get into a field that gives you the freedom to work from home, for example, or gives you the ability to really sustain your life with a more than decent wage. That's very much what Coding Bootcamp has made possible and has have done really well. Because of course, with the promise of the dream, there's everything that came after that, which is the shortness of the programs, 5, 6 months, sometimes 9, but that is still at a lower cost than a traditional education, the 4 years education. So it's really opening the Pandora's box in a way of, there's a dream that's achievable for many, and following up on that dream and kind of delivering on it. So that's one thing. I think the second element is, and most students will be familiar with that because that's often a decision point. It's very practical. And so oftentimes, if you're thinking about getting into tech, you're going to be faced with a computer science degree, and it's going to be 2 years, 4 years. And it's going to be fantastic and great, and it's going to really open a ton of doors. But oftentimes, you'll see those computer science graduates unable to build a website or create an app of any kind or publish to the cloud. And it's not a bad thing. I mean, we've learned other things that are going to take them further, in a different path, I would say, in their career. But the ability to, after a few weeks, start to see the results of what you've learned and go from, I don't know how to code, to I know how to create a website and publish it. It creates so much energy, right? And so being practical is not just, it's going to help you get a job, but it's also, I would say, giving you the energy and the confirmation that, well, okay, I've done the right choice. Like I see how it's going to take me to that job because I see the result of what I learned in a matter of weeks. In a computer science degree, fantastic, but you're going to learn algorithm for like 6 months. You're going to program in Java and you're going to wonder, who does that? Who uses that? And plenty of people, but still kind of and if you're lucky, you're going to learn Java. You may actually learn C++, and stuff like that. So that's the second thing. And then the third thing, which has been in the industry for a long time, it's the concept of vocational schools. And that's why really TJ and Trent really represent. It's making sure that education is 100% aligned to the outcome of getting a job, right? And so the school is not just about teaching, it's about really preparing you for that shift, for that. More often than not, it's a new career. Sometimes actually we see more and more people just, preferring Coding Bootcamp to going to college. So it could be their first career. But it's very much that alignment of outcomes. You're going to learn something that's really going to be aligned to the job that you're going to get next. And I think that's the other thing that I would say traditional education or post-secondary education doesn't typically do. That's something that you see in vocational schools, right? If you want to become a nurse, if you want to know how to drive a truck and become a truck driver, you're going to always have the training that really is going to match you super well to that job in the end. And that's also something very new with coding bootcamps that didn't exist in computer science typically.
Yeah, no, those are really excellent points. I completely agree with them. So the way that this conversation is going to go, I'm going to ask you guys some challenging questions. I'm a big advocate of boot camps because I'm a boot camp grad and I see the benefits, like what you talked about, the promise of a dream. I'm a product of immigrant parents, and when your immigrant parents invest in your education, you are as invested in that education as them. So you have you have that on your shoulders of like, my dad paid for my finance degree. Yeah. Like I got to be successful in it, no matter, even if your heart and soul are not in it. And I was there for 6 years. I didn't enjoy it. And I thought I was like a failure. And it weighed down on me. And I'm someone who's very positive, and I like to look at things, with glass half full sort of view. And it sat with me for a while. So I see that, I see the fact that you don't have to invest $30,000 to get the degree, and you can make that career transition in a much shorter span. So I see the model and I see why it works. But having said that, there are some obvious gaps that tend to happen post the 12 weeks. And I want to also address that. Like, what are some ways that students can work with either, if they haven't fully comprehended everything that they captured within like 9 weeks, 12 weeks. Some boot camps are 3 months, some are 6. There's some that are complete, like a year, right? So it's like, how do we battle? Because it's the way that I look at boot camps, it's almost like you guys are building the space race, but it's of the mind, right? That's how we kind of coin it in MintBean, is like you're kind of conditioning your brain to pick up on these skills at a very, very accelerated pace. So that muscle memory is still very weak when it comes to just like how the information is being processed, how it's being consumed. And then you're thrown into the wild, right? Where people are telling you, oh, you learned JavaScript. No, but you should learn React. So that's what they're battling. And then they're coming back and saying, oh, the bootcamp didn't teach me that, right? But what you guys do is you teach on a very first principle basis of like, we're giving you the tools to learn. Now, what you can do with those tools is really like, it's like we've kind of gotten you on the first step of this ladder. And I think that's really important. And I don't know if that's the marketing material that goes into the sector, or if it's individual players. And I want to talk about that as well. But these are all excellent points, and I just want to recap them before we go on to TJ. So promise of a dream, the practicality of the program, and the fact that outcomes is very aligned to job placements. TJ, you want
me to just? Yeah, I can just jump right off of that. And first, I hope you ask some really tough questions, because one, I know that Trent is mentally prepared for any of that. The fact that he, is focusing on breathing. One of my favorite tips for, graduates in their interview process is don't be afraid to ask, do you mind if I take a second to think about this? You slow down the interview, you get a chance to gather your thoughts. And then I know Ludo's had a chat with Don, the developer, and he does not hold back. So I felt the pressure there, and I'd love to see, what you can bring, Navi.
You did amazingly well, TJ, in your interview. I saw it. It was great. Really good interview.
Thank you. I luckily you I think led the way for the industry after all of the boot camp, students had chatted. So I kind of had an idea as to what he was going to be throwing out there. But no, it's good. I mean, I think just to kind of reiterate what boot camps do great, and you just see it here. Half of this conversation has been around outcomes, how to answer the most important question of an interview tips, And then you look at the chat in the corner and you have all of this communication going on, and these people who are not just excited to connect on LinkedIn, but then support each other. And I don't know about most people's, traditional educational experience, whether it was high school, college, or university, but statistically, colleges, the average 4-year degree student only spends 20 minutes their entire 4 years with their career services center. And that's an average. So you're talking about going through, 4 years, possibly upwards of hundreds of thousands of dollars. And the thing that you are now about to jump into, you have literally it's almost like you had a passing conversation with somebody at, a bus stop. So I think there's room for improvement. I don't think, colleges and universities, are the wrong route. I think that there's definitely a misconception, and it's an easy headline to follow, which is boot camps versus universities. They both have pros and cons, and it's really about what fits you and your needs a little bit better, whether it's, timeline, whether it's location, cost, and, kind of personal goals as well. And that's one of the coolest parts about working, at a boot camp, is that the fact that you get to see changes to the curriculum on a, quarterly, sometimes weekly, at the very, very least, annual basis. Whereas if you're looking at traditional education, it's a 2 to 4 year process to update the curriculum. And that's if the instructor wants to do it. So you have to have an instructor who's also motivated. I do think that one of the things that, boot camp graduates are able to kind of set themselves apart with from, computer science majors, or, even people who are self-taught when it comes to the job search process, is the ability to learn how to learn. Too often we are handheld when it comes to traditional education. You are handed material, told to memorize it, but then all you are is given a test. And then as soon as that test is over, the material, kind of seeps out. Whereas you're constantly building, at a boot camp. And it's also one of the things that makes it so fun. When are you going to have an opportunity in your life to focus on one subject, and while you're learning, as soon as you've just learned that concept, apply it? Oh, and then, by the way, you can share it with family and friends to show them what it is that you're building and that you're working on. I remember, my first experience with boot camps was back when I was working in Toronto, and we had a client who was looking to hire 50 junior software developers. And the woman said, hey, we need them to have a computer science degree. And so, of course, we go to the University of Toronto and Waterloo, and we reached out to everybody that we could. Not only did the graduates struggle to communicate what it was that they could do, but very few of them actually had projects that they could show off. And finally, I stumbled across a student who went to Lighthouse Labs, and his project blew away every computer science major that I had talked to. Yet the hiring manager wouldn't look at him because of the fact that he went to a boot camp. And now this was 2014, so the industry's come a long way at the time. But it is so cool to be able to talk to people and say, hey, look at what I can do. I may not have had the same traditional route that people are used to, but I'm ready to, step up and perform, when needed. So don't know if that answered the question or if I went off in a tangent, because
tangents are great. We love tangents. I go into tangents all the time, so don't apologize when it comes to tangents. You said something interesting. We actually have we have a talk on how boot camps build their curriculums, and we have Dan Weeks from Full Stack Academy who's coming in as one of the panelists. He's been a chair on, I believe it's Cal Poly University, and he's been a chair there. He was a founding member, and he's been a chair in a university with comp sci majors and software engineers. And now he's building curriculums for boot camps. So the conversation of how curriculums are built inside of boot camps is an interesting one. And then you also mentioned about, hiring junior developers. And then we also have like this company called Datadog, who hired 150 bootcamp grads in the last 3 years. And they're coming in for proudly hiring bootcamp grads. But this is all great, but like there's still companies out there. Like I've spoken to like, I won't name which one, but I've spoken to two players from FANG, and they both said that they don't hire bootcamp grads. So two players out of like FANG said, no, we don't look at bootcamp grads. They're not, they don't have the theoretical knowledge of how applications are built. So we don't like, when it comes to apprenticeship, when it comes to internships or hiring talent for the junior level, that they just don't even look at that. What would you say to companies like that?
Well, I would say that they need to go look at the recent report that was put out, which showed that bootcamp graduates are getting hired at the same rate as four-year degree students for FANG companies. Now, the other note, and I think Ludo's got a good point that he probably wants to add here too, is that it really just depends on the hiring manager. You know, if a hiring manager has a personal experience, they went through something, they're more likely to hire somebody like them. So it's going to take a little bit. And it's awesome that we now have bootcamp graduates who are in these positions of directors of engineering. But, you know, it really does come down to that individual person, and removing bias from the hiring process is a challenge across every single industry, not just bootcamps and computer science majors.
No, that's fair.
I would be curious to know if you can tell me who they are off channel. So we work with a number of large companies in that scale. And what we observe is that they are creating channels specifically for boot camps. And they end up with the listings of apprenticeship. This is one model. Dan may talk about this as well. But the strategy of an apprenticeship is a gateway to introduce the bootcamp grad into a larger organization. So I'm very surprised to hear that there are some in that category that are denying, while there are large organizations and FANG organizations who work with us distinctly to create a pathway. So they're doing it either, I don't know, quietly, strategically. Some are sharp in this regard. But yeah, it's really interesting to hear that some are not playing the game. Some recognize the talent, and they are deploying these new channels.
You know, what's interesting is that I think some of them are playing sort of the like, let's see who goes first game. Because this was a conversation I had I want to say like at least 6 months ago. So they might have changed their stance on it. I know that the apprenticeship and internships were not open to bootcamp grads, which I thought was interesting. And there's also a pay disparity. You know, when we haven't talked about that, and I don't know if this is the right session for it, but there's definitely a pay disparity when it comes to what bootcamp grads make. And maybe that comes from like the fact that a lot of bootcamp grads are transitioning into software development from like, you know, either customer service or even retail or manufacturing or all sorts of different fields. And for a lot of them, this is like the most amount of money they've made. So they don't think that like they can go grab what software developers are really making. They're benchmarking them way lower than what the competitive market is saying. What do you guys have to say about that?
For me, I mean, the industries should not be reduced to working at FANG, right? In a way, and it's awesome when a bootcamp graduate can get into the Facebook, the Twitter, the Microsoft, etc. But I would say we have to be careful to not reduce the opportunities to just that, because the reality is, yeah, it's going to be harder to get in those companies because of what you just described, and it's going to be harder to get in, and it's going to be harder for the graduate who's going to try to get in and is going to, wonder why they're not getting into that. For me, the FANG dream is absolutely possible, but I actually will recommend graduate to get a first job and a second job before tackling that one, because those companies they're gonna be more open for bootcamp graduates if you're showing that you've had actually a job as a software engineer or web developer before that. That's gonna ease your way in. And other companies in the financing industry, in the retail industry, I mean, in your own industry, if you're shifting careers, you actually can get into the potentially even the same company and get a job as a software engineer. And you're going to really have an easier path, I will say. Not that it's cheaper actually to get there, or it's that it's lesser of a position. It's not. You really want to actually think about how you're going to get in a job in the industry, not just from the lens of, you want that shiny object over there, that's a Microsoft position, but hey, you want to get into the industry, you want a high paying job, and you can get there, and 90% of the time it's not going to be at FANG. So that would be my contribution to that. You really want to be careful when you're setting your target on FANG, not making it too much of a big deal and kind of not putting it on a pedestal too much.
Yeah. And something to add, to that is just the timeline of a FANG hiring process. And from at least our experience, a lot of bootcamp graduates are going through a career change where this is an investment of time and money, and they may not have the luxury of simply waiting for between 2 weeks between every single 6-stage interview process at one of the FANG companies. So, yes, it's not bad to look at those to, set your targets on that. But, I think Ludo made a good point. And then, there's a lot of good points in the chat too, which is you're probably going to get your hands on more things in a small to medium-sized business. You're going to learn more. And, FANG sounds great at first. It rolls off the tongue nicely. But I know companies, here in Orange County who actually have people leave to go to FANG and come back, even though they're turning down stock and equity because of the fact that they just didn't like the work that they were doing. So I think there's you kind of have to see what's going to work best for you, and then just keep an open mind, because you're also going to change over time. And there's a lot of great places out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And Phil, just a couple of people actually mentioned some really interesting points. There's great companies outside of FANG. And of course, like you actually do touch more of the stack at a startup. Like you have more autonomy over, understanding the full stack of what goes into application building. I want to maybe change.
I just want to on that as well, just because this is where the training is also important on the career success part of it. So you have as we mentioned, like the tell me about yourself as an example. There's also training on how to talk about salary and how to have a conversation and posture. And like that, if that is ignored, it can create an environment where that alum or that candidate could be taken advantage of or be pitched a lower amount. How do you even bring up the conversation about salary? When do you bring it up? At what stage in the interview does it come up? Should you bring it up? Should you be afraid to talk about it? Is it taboo? I think there's a general notion that talking about salary early and kind of putting your stance and your range out there early is you're not supposed to do that. So I think the importance as well on the alum or the job seeker, when you're going through this process, make salary and the conversations and how you talk about these things as essential as your code, because that's how you are able to set a particular tone or set a precedent in the dialogue. In our experience, we don't necessarily have those issues of having our alums being undercut or underpitched. The reason is because of this training. When we're talking with them, we go through this dialogue. How are you having this conversation? When did you talk about salary? Did we do the research? What does this company overall tend to offer? Here are the links for it. And then going through the process with them so that they are skilled. They do this one time and they realize, okay, they position themselves in a proper way. They will know how to do this in the future. I think if that training is not included, it continues to create this lopsided affair where companies can kind of dictate or have hold this umbrella of fear over candidates where you're not supposed to deal in this way, which you actually can. You just have to have the training for it.
That's interesting. From what I'm hearing with what you guys are talking about is, a lot of people don't know that the bootcamp industry is only 10 years old. So there's a lot of iteration that's going on in-house where you're looking at the challenges that are happening and you're like, okay, well, salary negotiation is one of them. Like TJ, I've seen, you hold a couple of sessions on negotiation just inside of the Mint Bean community. So yeah, Trent, like that's amazing that you all do that. And Grace Hopper and Full Stack Academy both have like excellent programs. So I can see like them not being underpitched. But if we look at the greater, there's a lot of criticism that the sector gets of like, hey, like I feel abandoned by my boot camp. They didn't do. I don't have like I've been trying to look for work for a year, and nothing came out of it. And there was no post program support. How are you capturing, I guess like this question is for each of you, how are you capturing the criticism that, because it's not necessarily, your specific institution, it's the industry as a whole that's like getting a lot of criticism for like, oh, the outcome reports are not really, they're not true, because what tends to happen is that you're looking at like if alum got, picked up by a company, but you're not necessarily looking at what was that job title, right? So if I graduated from Full Stack or Learning Fuse, we're not really looking at like, hey, am I a software developer or did I become a QA or what, like, or am I even outside of tech? It's a really matter of like, I just graduated and I found a job. So there's that criticism. There's the criticism of like, hey, I have like major skill gaps in my learning. And then there's just like, I feel completely abandoned by my institution. They didn't, or even like, and now there's the layer of ISAs. And then that's a whole bag of fun on its own. But let's maybe like leave the ISAs, because I feel like that's a deeper issue, and we could probably do a whole session on it. So yeah, like how are you dealing with the challenges that the grads are facing, and how are you incorporating that in your program?
Yeah, I would say I think it's important to realize it's a two-way street, and that there's a relationship when it comes to entering the boot camp and going through the career development portion of this. So the relationship between the coach or the support, whatever that looks like, whatever model that looks like, and then also the individual who has in their volition the ability to decide or to not decide, to take action on certain things. So I think when those conversations come up, it typically is one-sided, where it's only looked at what has happened to the alum, right? Here's the disastrous outcome. But if we go through an inquiry, which I think is something that is needed in some form, an inquiry to discover where the nature of the challenge actually is. In a number of cases, and I can only speak from our full stack perspective, when that happens, there's a consistency with relieving themselves of the support of the coaching system. And that means either not joining the community, not staying in touch with the coach, and kind of venturing off or going rogue to do their own thing. And so in that environment, if something disastrous happens, it's understandable that that alum would say, okay, it didn't happen for me the way that I intended. But if we go through inquiry and we ask the questions, we would be able to understand what the actual diagnosis is. Is it actual lack of support, which it is possible, or is it the alum not taking the guidance or utilizing the resources? That is also a possibility. And so we look at it from multiple perspectives, not just, the alum has not had an experience or they're taking over a year to get a job. Why, what's wrong with the boot camp? Why is that happening? Right? We don't look at it that way. We ask more questions to figure out what's going on. If that is the case, then how can we further assist? But ultimately, it's a relationship where the graduate has to also take initiative and make choices.
Yeah, it's a very difficult topic. So when we created NewCamp, when I actually created NewCamp in 2017, the mantra that we had at the time was, we're going to promise you a quality education. We're not going to promise you a job. And the idea was to really separate our goals, right? Our primary goal was, we're going to make coding education, super affordable and high quality. And that's going to be what we're going to focus on. That's going to be what we're going to build a business on. We're going to give you the tools to get a job, but we're not going to be ultimately accountable for you to get a job, which is, I think, what I heard Trent say a little bit. Like, we're going to do our best, but we're not going to be accountable to find your job. You're still going to be accountable as the student to do the work, right? You're going to have to apply. You're going to have to prepare. You're going to have to put the time. And I think right now it's a little bit unhealthy how we're really bringing those two together, where suddenly coding bootcamps are accountable for providing great education, which is 100% what we should be doing, and it's fair. But we are also now putting ourselves, and it's us, it's the coding bootcamp industry doing it to ourselves, right? Putting ourselves in the position of being also accountable to place every student into a job. And why we're doing that? Well, for me, and that's why New Camp from the beginning was not expensive. It's because overall, if you're charging, thousands of tens and thousands of dollars, you have to justify it. You have to justify that it's actually worth it. And so the industry has been wrapped around this, employment numbers and advertising, like 99% of our graduates got a job. And there's been some, well-known situations where state attorneys have said, hold on a minute, show me the math again in New York, without naming anyone. But it's a very difficult situation for us, but obviously as well for the people that are trying to pick the right bootcamp. And we've talked about Don the developer. I mean, Don will be very brutal and say, hey, don't believe anything you see on the internet in terms of job placement. Like, talk to people, get their experience, try to find an alumni, ask them about, how much support did you get from the bootcamp to get a job. I would say to people that are out there, students, I think you really have to still be in a mindset of you're going to work on getting that job. And yes, you need to look for the right amount of support, but ultimately it is more healthy in my mind for the student to feel accountable for getting a job than to think that the coding bootcamp is going to be accountable to finding that job. That's kind of a point of view, my point of view, and Newcamp's point of view, I will say.
Yeah. So just to kind of, echo what those guys are saying is, there can be, not of course across the board, but there can be a misunderstanding and a misexpectation that a boot camp is going to take you from point A, slingshot you to point B, and you're going to land in that job. And that, really isn't the case. At least the way that, we like to look at it, and one of our instructors here at Learning Views described it perfectly, is we're giving you the skill set, the tools, and the momentum to head off into a career. Now, by no means is your learning experience over, is your career development over. And hopefully that's something that really excites people, is the fact that as you get closer to the end of the boot camp, you can feel yourself learning more. You can feel yourself getting better and better. One of the challenges, though, as well, is the expectations from, the employment side, which is, we all know that job descriptions are poorly misaligned. So, if you're going out and you're going into this job search with kind of, this tunnel vision and this kind of solo Lone Ranger approach, it's going to feel brutal. It's going to be a struggle, because what I hear a lot is that people are only applying to roles where they line up perfectly, which statistically you only need to line up and match 50% of the job requirements to have the same chances of an interview as 100%. So give yourself the benefit of the doubt, feel a little bit of confidence going into it. But on the other side of the coin, the industry as a whole does need to look in the mirror and make sure that we're constantly iterating on, are we improving the curriculum? Are we keeping up with employers, and what their need? Are we listening to both the employers and the alumni? Because we could listen to employers all day and turn that and take that to the curriculum development. But if the alumni are hearing something different or experiencing something different, then we need to apply that, knowledge as well. And I think when you look at a lot of the negative sentiment around the bootcamp space, you typically see one of two things with poor reviews, YouTube videos, Reddit threads, is either one, somebody clearly didn't do their research, and you can just tell by the way that they wrote it that they were expecting to be walked into a role. And that's unfortunate because, you know, on the other side of the coin, you also have the boot camp who just let them kind of come in. And part of what our responsibility is to make sure that this is going to be a fit for people. As cool as it sounds to build websites and mobile apps and, you know, do all of this work in tech, it's not easy. And if there's a boot camp who's telling you that it's going to be easy, then you need to take a step back, because if it was easy, more people would be doing it, and there'd be 100%, you know, hiring. And the industry as a whole would say, we love bootcamp graduates. You know, computer science, you know, is so, you know, 1990. So there's a balance to it. I think with any, you know, it's a life decision. You are taking and investing time, money, and energy, and you are going to go through a roller coaster of emotions as you're doing this. So if you're just going to click on an ad and just sign up, then part of it does come back to you. You know, if it's like buying a car, you know, if you were going to invest, you know, 4,000 or 10,000 or whatever amount in that car, you're going to do your research, you're going to test drive, you're going to ask people what it was like. So I think Ludo brought up a great point, which is, yes, you know, you can do some of your research on the Bootcamp website and you can, you know, see what they're putting out on social media, but where you really want to go is find alumni on LinkedIn. Connect with them and ask them, you know, what their experience was like, because they shouldn't have anything, you know, to hold back or reason to be biased one way or the other. Now they're going to be a little biased because, of course, they went to boot camp. If they had a good experience, they want to tell you about their good experience. But make sure you're approaching it, you know, from the lens of, you know, this is a major life decision. I want to make sure I feel comfortable with this. But, you know, there's a lot of good that the bootcamp industry has done. I think, you know, statistically, you know, according to course reports, 79% of alumni are landing jobs. Now, as we know, there's layers to those statistics, but if you go look at a college or university's outcomes, very rarely are they going to tell you how many people are employed. More often than not, they're going to tell you how many people graduate. And statistically, 52% of people who start a four-year degree are graduating. That is absurd. When you're telling 17 and 18-year-olds that this is the path you're supposed to go. Oh, and by the way, while you're still figuring out your life, tell us what you want to study and what you want to do for the rest of your life as well. Sorry, not too passionate about that, that decision right there.
It's interesting. You know, I'm actually finding it hard to ask you guys like difficult questions because I don't know who this Don person is. I need to look them up. But, you know, because the thing is like, the way that I look at boot camps is I look at them as startups. I don't look at them with the mindset of like, this is a educational institution, although that it is, but they don't take any of the bureaucratic red tapes that when you think about universities and colleges and like chairmans and, you know, the faculty board. I remember like in my university, like, you know, going into to my like my college building, like it was like this old dark building like that no one went to. It was like it was just like it was not very welcoming, you know. So it's really interesting. But yeah, like coming back to iterating the program and making sure that you are at the end of the day serving the students. I think that there's still a lot of challenges that are definitely there. You know, they're like the skill gap is an interesting one. You know, a lot of people don't feel like they're ready at 12 weeks. They wish the program was longer. They feel that they were rushed, that it's like, oh, you know, and everyone, the fact that there's no admission process, like there's no one that's being tested as, because, you know, like I said, this is a business.
Sorry, what do you mean by no admissions process? Because we have an interview and a technical assessment that people have to pass.
Right. I'm not talking about one specific school, right? I'm not talking about
across the board.
Yeah, across the board. So because you guys get grouped, right? Like it's not like we haven't yet, it's only 10 years old, right? This entire sector. We haven't yet established players where you're like, hey, these are the Ivy Leagues of bootcamp grads, like of bootcamp schools. Like, you know, you want to go to Learning Fuse, you want to go to Full Stack, you want to go to New Camp, or like this is like what is the NYU version of boot camps? What is the Yale version? Like, we haven't established that yet. You guys are all kind of clumped into this one category. So when you're clumped into a category, you're dealing with the best of the player and the worst of the player in the same bucket. And you get grouped together and you're trying to battle that with each other. You're trying to grab market share, and you're trying to grab okay, well, this there's that whole controversy around ISAs, right? And everybody gets grouped into it. And I've brought it up a couple of times because there's so much criticism around it. But then on the flip side, it's like you're offering these programs for like no cost in the beginning, and that brings such a diversity of talent. There's so, I remember when I went to GA, I don't know what it looks like now, there wasn't an admission process. It was more of an interview, and it didn't feel like she would have said no to me had I said anything different than what I said. It felt like this was like, hey, I'm interested in this program, and the bootcamp is interested in taking my money, and if there was an exchange of services that happened. So I'm curious, if any of you guys have thought about making a more stiffer admissions process, to kind of set a benchmark of who enters, and maybe you need to work on your skill set prior to the program.
I think with Trent, TJ, and myself, I think you have actually a good array of different perspectives on that. And I can actually share where we stand, and then Trent and TJ can talk about, the other approach to it. So Newcamp does not have admissions. Pretty much, if you want to get in, you're in. And the spirit of that is we want to give access to pretty much everyone who wants and needs access, without thinking that a 30 minutes conversation or a test is going to decide for you on your behalf if you can actually have access to the education or not. And we feel good about that because of the price point. You're going to get access. And if you feel like it doesn't work out for you, if you feel like, you're not qualified, or you need to actually learn online on your own a little bit more, you haven't lost much, right? You have lost, if it's 2 weeks, maybe $100, something like that. Mm-hmm. So that's one aspect of the business, which is no admission. It's very much like you will learn online, but with the structure and the support of, a classroom and instructors, that type of access. Our position on ISA, and it's very much personal for me, I am very strong against ISAs. Not the spirit of it, and the spirit is commendable, which is, again, aligned to outcomes, and you're going to pay us only if you get a job. Fantastic. But then in the process of doing that, instead of working on decreasing the cost of education, you actually justify doubling it, right? So a program that will cost $15,000 suddenly will cost $20,000, $25,000, $30,000 because you can pay it afterwards. And so there's a lack of effort to really think about, okay, what would it mean to reduce the cost of the program so that I actually don't need to make a job guarantee in the end. And that leads to the next point around ISA and in general job guarantees as well, is there's a ton of caveats, right? And when you're signing an ISA contract, you really want to make sure that you know exactly what you're signing, and when is it going to be triggered? Is it going to be forgiven or not, or just delayed? And so for those reasons as well, that ISA contract, it's really a person-to-person contract. It's not kind of regulated just yet, and it's actually unlawful in the state of New York and California for now. And so, yeah, for me, the ISA it goes in the wrong direction. I mean, everybody has been complaining about the cost of education, complaining about student loans. And to solve that, we're actually going to double the cost and then tie it to an outcome that may be actually not honored because there's caveats in it. So that's where we stand.
It's complicated.
Yeah.
Interesting. There's some really good questions that are coming in comments, and I think it might be a good opportunity to get everyone to just kind of like ask some of their questions. And I want these questions to be a little bit tougher, because we have your attention. You know, we don't often get you know, the founder and the director and the you know, someone who has years of experience in just in understanding what goes after the program and how to work with the individual mind to get past, you know, their own perceptions of like what they can achieve. I think one of the most difficult things that I've seen in our community is like, how do I pitch myself? Like, oh, like I have, like I've, you know, I was talking to somebody recently, and they've sort of jumped around. Like they were in retail, then they went into auto sales, then they went into hotel management, then they went into logistics, and then they went into IT systems, and then it was sort of like gradual, but they don't know how to pitch that. It's like, okay, well, I have this career that I did for like 5 years, 10 years, and then I did a 12-week program. What am I supposed to say to an employer? Like, how do I tell them that like you need to take a look at me seriously?
Yeah, I would jump in on that and just say it is, I think, firstly, not seeing those experiences as lacking value, that they all were valuable and they've gotten you to this point. It may be cliche, but it is the truth that you've developed certain skills, abilities. I also think in your training, looking at the non-technical skills also as skills. There's a report, it's called the Future of Work Report. I think it's Future of Work Report 2025 to 2030. And if you look at the list, it's like it shows, there's a graph that shows a list of like the top 24 skills, something to this effect. All of the skills except 3 are non-technical. All of them are cognitive, or ways of thinking, or ways of perceiving. So you're exactly, so like Phil says, the grit there, that's like a character skill. So all of those you are able to extract from your past experiences. If you just look at those, you probably have a pretty healthy list of contributions. And then the question becomes, how do those things make you a better software engineer? Because those are cross-functional. It doesn't matter where you've acquired them. It could have been at a job, a volunteer opportunity, it doesn't matter, but you have now the character skill or the cognitive skill. How do those things make you a better software developer? That can weave into your story, and that can help to remove you from dissecting your past experience and kind of kicking it and talking negatively about it. All of it has been valuable, and it's gotten you to this point. That'd be my first recommendation, because that is more of a mindset shift, and that will help you to see your experiences as valuable from the start. If you're talking to someone with that tone, and you are showing that they're valuable, the listener will, in kind, more likely than not, also see that you see it as valuable. If you're doing the opposite and talking lowly about your past experiences, well, you've done all of this and now you are in a better place. Well, I mean, you can imagine how the receiver would take that message. That's really just the very practical recommendation I would have on that.
Yeah, just to echo that, you know, you can find any of these reports pretty easily with the Google search. You know, LinkedIn does it, you know, every year. And, you know, as Trent mentioned, it's consistently soft skills that are listed as one of the major, you know, interest, or I guess kind of desired skills when hiring. And there's a few reasons for it. One, soft skills are harder to develop than hard skills. You know, as boot camps have just shown, you know, whether it's 3 months, 6 months, or 9 months, you can learn to code. Now, will a boot camp be able to teach you how to be an empathetic person and think creatively, you know, collaborate with other people? To a certain extent, yes. But a lot of that has been, you know, something that you've been developing your entire life. Whether you're 18 years old or you're 45 or 50 years old, these are things that you've kind of unconsciously been doing. And to an employer, that's needed because you're also working around other humans. And whenever you talk to an employer who has made bad hires, especially in tech, almost every single one of them has hired the technically strongest person, but somebody they weren't sure fit with the team. And 9 times out of 10, either that person quits or they fire that person because they can't work with each other. It's no longer the role in the world of let's take the coder and let's shove them in the back room and let's let them do their thing. You have to interact with so many different people now as a developer that as a bootcamp student, that is something that you should be showcasing and feel confident standing apart from a 20 or 21-year-old computer science graduate. Now, yes, some of them also have very strong soft skills, but it takes a while to develop those. And then from the standpoint of kind of what you're bringing to the table and the expectations, companies are never expecting you as an entry or junior level person to come in and start coding on day one. If they are, then you are at the wrong company. When I was working in recruiting and staffing, the reason that companies work with staffing agencies and ask for somebody to find someone with 5 years of experience and this framework and this technology and this cloud provider is because they need that person to step in and bring and start working with the team on day one. Whereas almost every single bootcamp graduate that I've talked to has been brought up to speed. They've been trained on the technology stack. They've been eased into the environment. So it's not so much about how is your coding skills right now as it is how do we see your coding skills progressing over the next 3 to 6 months, because you're an investment. And are you confident in your ability to get there? Because if you're not confident, unfortunately, we have 15, 20, 100 other applicants who are all telling us, look at me, I can do this. So it's tough to talk about yourself, but you also can't undersell yourself by saying, you know what, I'm only a bootcamp graduate, because you are so much more than that, and you're going to be so much more than that.
That's fair. I think what it is that we're kind of living in the age of free information. There's so much, you don't necessarily need to go to a boot camp to pick up software development and become an engineer. There's like all sorts of different resources like Free Code Camp. So a lot of students that go down the boot camp route, whether it's post a university degree or whether it's like, at 19 or whether it's like you've been doing something else and you decided to come, is because like they've invested in you, their expectations are higher. So it's like, oh, I could have just picked this up from Free Code. So instead, I'm not paying what the university system is looking at. I'm not paying 3-4 times what it would have cost me had I done, a bachelor's or a master's. But my expectations are still that like, hey, there's an institution here. They have instructors, they have TAs, they have career coaches. So the expectation is more. And I think that's what there's sometimes is a misalignment. And I don't know if it happens from the marketing team. And I don't want to throw them under the bus because it's not just, one individual. But is it something that happens from the admission standpoint where the dream is like, is too good? It's like, hey, like come to this program for 9 weeks and you'll land a job that's going to give you like 80K. Because there are ads I could do a simple Google search and we can find some pretty hot names that are like very prominent in the industry that are doing things like that. So, and it's like, but is that really true? Because there's an incubation period. And depending on the individual, depending on how much understanding that they've like gathered within that time frame, that incubation period can be anywhere from like, okay, well, 1 month I graduated, then I'm able to secure a position to, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, or even a year. And like, what is New Camp, Learning Fuse, and Full Stack doing to make sure that alignment of like is there on day one? Like, this person has picked up the course, and you're making sure that like that they're going in it with the right mindset. It's not like, hey, like now that you're in the program, you're going to be guaranteed a job in 12 weeks. I think that's where the frustration really comes from when we look at boot camps. And if you guys are able to change the script around that, I really think that this industry is here to stay if we can get that right.
So I think there's a minimum amount of time that the bootcamp needs to deliver in terms of education to feel good about, having prepared the student enough to get a job. And to be honest with you, that minimum amount of time, I don't think it's been established what it is exactly. But when I hear 9 weeks, it doesn't feel right. So in my mind, for example, it's closer to the 16, 20 weeks kind of thing, right? Love to hear Trent and TJ's, but yeah, 9 weeks feels like really short and accelerated. But at the end of the day, I think there's a statistic that I think the industry is aligned around, which I think is the right one. You want to look at employment after 6 months, right? You don't want to promise that someone is going to get a job right after finishing the boot camp. And yes, of course, there's anecdotal evidence that people have been able to do that. But realistically, you want to set the expectation that, yeah, it's going to be a journey and it's going to be almost as long as the time you spent in the boot camp. So 6 months is where actually the industry is kind of, when we publish data, it's often 6 months after the boot camp, and that feels right. There is a question from Edema, which is, hey, how are we going to structurally solve the problem of, bootcamp graduates feeling more prepared to those interviews? And I think it goes back to your point, Navi. And I think, to be honest with you, the solution is what you are doing with Minbin. The point is, during the bootcamp, we're going to expose you to a lot of concepts, technologies, and you want to be, and you're going to hear people in the industry say that you want to really turn into a T-shaped engineer, right? We're going to give you the top of the T. We're going to expose you to a lot of things in a short amount of time, and sometimes with some level of depth, but most of the time it's going to be breadth, right? And you're going to work on a project, and really your time at the end of the bootcamp is to really concentrate on developing that, the T, the leg of the T, I will say, and go deep in one topic. And you do that by attending Minbin, doing hackathons, but you really have to take that knowledge and apply it and learn how to talk about that experience and what you've done. To connect back to Trent's point about, hey, tell me about yourself. If you're timid, if you're introvert like I am, you're going to go straight into your project as well. And I know maybe it's not going to talk too highly about your emotional IQ, but if you feel very comfortable about discussing the project, the depth of it, what you've learned, what was challenging, how you overcame those challenges, that pitch is going to be a great pitch to give to a hiring manager, showing your passion, showing your depth, showing your grit in terms of how much you've learned. And so that's how I think you really connect everything together. And I'll add one more thing that relates to the previous question. If you were, for example, at the front desk of a hotel and you lost your job, and you're now in a coding bootcamp, and actually that's a real story, and you felt that, there was always a problem because at the front desk, you never know when a room is actually ready for the next guest. Like there's people working at, upstairs cleaning rooms, but when a guest arrives, ask if the room is ready, you're kind of struggling. Okay, if that person comes in early, you don't know. And so a student actually built an app that will connect directly the cleaner in the different, hotel stairs to the guest. And so you are in an industry most likely where you can actually have the knowledge that could equip you to build something unique and different. And that will give you the fuel to really know what to build and what to build next and how to improve the experience and what type of features you want to add, et cetera, et cetera. That connects your past industry to your next job in the tech industry, et cetera, et cetera. All right. That was a mouthful.
No, I agree. I think, coming from finance, my God, it I don't even know the horror stories that I should share. We were one of the systems that one of my companies used to work on was AS400. And it was
IBM.
Yeah, I was like, what?
That's
I remember the first time I interacted with it, I was like, what are we in the 1980s? What is going on?
Yeah.
It was it was mind blowing, like how behind
S400,
some
yeah.
of the companies are when it comes to their tech stack. And that's what I loved about the tech industry, is just like how incredibly fast paced it is, how incredibly adaptive it is to like, the changing ecosystem. And it's constantly just trying to iterate and be better. And like you said, I think the hope of tech is that we're trying to solve real problems, whether it's the problem of that one person who's behind the service desk and is like, hey, like this is like, I don't, maybe I can't like solve world peace and cancer, but I can make my life a little bit easier and know which room is clean. So I love that. And I think that like, someone just kind of mentioned, I think it was Rahul said, it's been difficult to find junior dev positions in a sea of mid-senior roles. I think creating projects like that, where you are showcasing like that you're looking at, this is one of the, I'll give you guys this. This is one of the things that I think boot camps excel at, is the fact that when you bring in diversity like that, where you have people from customer service, manufacturing, auto sales, like you're looking at people who have been dealing with like real problems. Like, I went in, my mom's been in the hospital for the last like 10 days, and it's been really challenging. And I was like, because of COVID, visitation is like really difficult. And I went into the hospital, and there were some like key things that I noticed that are like just the way that they have like the nurses set up to do data entry. Like it's in the hallway. I don't know if anyone has gone into a hospital lately, but it's like there's like so much work that needs to be done in like making that space. And like, I don't know if we're in tech, we're always looking for innovation. We're like, hey, like we could solve this problem. Like, why isn't there an iPad next to the patient? And why aren't you entering all that information right there? Because you could probably like have a data entry error if you like, literally the computer is stationed in the hallway. Which I find like weird, because like you're getting distracted with like nurses moving around, visitors moving around. So yeah, I think that that's one of the things that boot camps really excel at, is bringing in diversity and then taking that diversity and solving real life problems.
You want to jump in, Trent? Or do you want? I'll
just say for
Yeah.
the challenges in the chat around the junior dev roles, excuse me, is to not focus on that so much. And it's largely a part of our training is, if you get caught up in just these titles, you're going to hold yourself back. And it's just this repeat cycle of, it's going back to how you're thinking about the opportunities. If you don't see junior dev, it doesn't mean you can't apply. Right? Even if you see 2 to 3 years, it doesn't mean you can't apply. Why can't you apply to it? Who said you can't apply to it? If we know that there's an issue with the job descriptions and HR and that whole area of the misalignment, then you would do yourself a disservice if you did not go for it. You're at 0% chance. But if you put the application in, or if you reach out to a contact, write a message, now you're at 50%, because either it could work for you or it doesn't work for you. So the emphasis, it goes back again to the skill set and kind of knowing how to do this. How do you navigate these environments? We know there's certain things that are out of our control. We know there's, as Navi is describing, this huge issue with the admissions and like people pouring in, but there are very precise skill sets in this career development process that you need to develop or need to give the utmost attention to. If you're becoming super skilled coders, you got to become super skilled career success or career developer job seekers. What are those skills? What are those specific skills? Because someone who put out a post that says 3 to 5 years of experience and you reach out to them on LinkedIn, you'd be surprised if they actually have a conversation with you. Wow, why did they have a conversation with you? If their job posting says 3 to 5 years, well, now that's an opening. And when you have that conversation and you pitch yourself, all of a sudden you have moved to a next stage. How did you move to a next stage? And the job description says 3 to 5 years. I make that, I'm being facetious, but these are some of the realistic environments that our alums go through, because not every job is going to say junior developer. It's not going to say new grad. It's not going to be new camp. You're not going to be seeing these titles all the time. So if you limit yourself only to those, you are selling yourself short. And it just goes back to reinforcing the importance of the thinking, the mindset, and then the skill of how you talk about yourself and approach these things.
Yeah. So just jumping back really quick to, Navi's question earlier, which is, how are boot camps, doing this and aligning is, we have to kind of listen to, once again, both the employer, the students, both the students who are in the program, the students who are graduated from the program. And then we have to constantly iterate on it. And this is where, her point about, in comparison to kind of a startup is apt, which is, if you aren't, and this is kind of just tech in general, if you aren't constantly looking at yourself and saying, how can we do better? Somebody else is going to come along and do it better. I don't know if many people know this. Apple has developed one product in their entire lifetime. And I can't even name it. Everything else, they've waited for somebody else. They've done something a little bit better. They've connected it. And it's impressive. But at the same time, very rarely do people come up with something completely, new and novel. It's how you execute on that. And, as a boot camp, it's easy to start to either chase shiny object syndrome. Ooh, there's a new framework. Ooh, there's a new library out there. Or listen to one employer who says you have to be teaching this. Well, if that employer is going to hire 50 graduates, then yes, let's change up the curriculum a little bit. But if it's one person, that's their opinion. And then you have to go back and meet people with where they are and what their expectations are. Because, as you've kind of covered with, each of our programs, we have different structures, we have different prices, we have different, kind of commitments as to, what students should expect out of it. And that's part of the research process. It's part of, making any type of purchase or decision in your life. So know what you're getting yourself into and what it is that you are committing to from both, a time and a money standpoint. And if needed, take a step back and really consider if this is the right fit, because this may not be the best analogy, but I've heard people say, if you're thinking about getting a tattoo, don't do it then, wait 4 months. And if you're still thinking about it, then okay, now that's something that you should be doing. Because once again, as cool as development and technology is, as amazing as the opportunities are, the money, the freedom to work with what you want, the ability to build cool things, it is going to be an uphill battle. And that's the case with any career change. I mean, statistically in 2019, this is pre-COVID, the average job seeker looked for a job for 5 months. This isn't boot camps. This isn't entry level. This is every single job seeker across the board. So going in, knowing that it's going to be a challenge, having that goal in mind, and getting back to the person who mentioned grit. Angela Duckworth has proven that grit is the single biggest factor when it comes to success in your life. And that's the reason that the military and the Marine Corps, and I believe the Green Berets use it, when testing people. So there's a lot of, the boot camp having to look at itself and say, are we, justifying the outcomes? Have our students felt like they got what they paid for? Now if students come back and say, hey, I didn't get what I paid for, now you have to look at either adding more to the curriculum or changing your cost. And I think a lot of our students have agreed that it was a good investment, even though it's not the cheapest program. And some of them had to take loans to do, what they're doing. Now, in regards to the job search, it is, and Trent can, attest this, same with Ludo, same with Navi, it is probably the most negative experience you will have in your life. And it's simply because of the fact that you are constantly being told no, as well as the fact that you don't have enough experience or you're learning the wrong thing. So when you go in with a reframed mindset of, this isn't going to be easy, this is going to be hard, this is going to be an uphill battle, I'm going to hear no, but that no means that it's not the right fit for me, I have another company, it's going to become a little bit easier. The other aspect is you can't stop. Nobody is going to hire you if you aren't applying. Actually, sorry, there's always one silver bullet in the job search. It is networking. Go to the alumni network of your boot camp. Not only are they people who can help give you advice as to what you're doing, but they're hired. They are developers. Either their company is hiring, they know of people and recruiters who are reaching out to them. So it's really easy to get bogged down into our own, oh my God, why am I not being hired? I don't have enough experience. This isn't right for me, imposter syndrome. But the value of a boot camp, I think, as a whole, is the support that you're going to get and the support that you've paid for. So when things get tough, go back to that Discord community, go back to the Slack channel, attend a Mint Bean event, go to your career coach. These are the people who are there to help you. This isn't college where it's going to be really, really hard to get in touch with your career coach 4 or 5 years after you've graduated. This is the boot camp who is making that commitment that they aren't college or university. And then finally, to Trent's point about, 4 to 5 years of experience and stuff, try to ignore the years of experience. Companies would love to hire people who have experience. It's easier for them. But if you align with the tech stack, that means that anytime they have an opening that's a junior or an entry-level role, or they realize, hey, we can't find a mid-level developer for $65,000, you're going to be somebody that they might turn to. So try to keep your options open. Don't just apply. Don't just network. Don't just, submit coding challenges all day. Find what you enjoy. Have a balance of the unenjoyable, activities and the enjoyable activities. And if you need to, take a day off. Now, don't take multiple days off, because that's where you start to go down a slippery slope. One day of habits, are created. What is it? 21 days to create a habit, 1 day, to break it. But vices and bad habits are things that you do consistently. So if one of your vices or a bad habit is that you like to, disconnect for an entire day, that's fine. But if you disconnect for an entire week, it's going to be tough to find jobs. Sorry. And then final point, I know I'm on a soapbox. Code every single day. You are telling people that you love to develop. You are trying to stand out in the job search. And as somebody who has looked at thousands of resumes, when you're looking at them for only 6 seconds per resume, then a couple minutes for everything else, scanning somebody's GitHub is super easy to do. Is that commit history there? I've heard students who have said, I've had companies who have said, we loved this person. I go, that person actually barely graduated. And they go, but we want to interview them because they're coding every single day.
Dude, you said that so well. We're coming to an end. We're 3 minutes over, but I think this is what boot camps really excel at, the fact that your students' mindset so well. And I did a 4-year degree in finance and marketing. I never met my career coach. I don't even know what building I would have had to go into to meet somebody from the career success team. So yeah, I think the fact that there's a lot of support and there's an entire community behind the bootcamp institution is one of the things that makes the entire experience so successful. But we're gonna, and you talked about networking. So we're opening up our first networking round inside this Zoom call. And before we do that, I just want you guys to wrap up any last points of what are you excited about for the next decade? 30 seconds. Let's go from Trent to Ludo. What are you excited about next for full stack? What are you excited about for the bootcamp grad? What are you excited about for the institution or the sector?
I think overall, it's going to continue to grow as more value is going to be included into the industry through more professionals developing these skills. I think it's going to become a norm to develop skills outside of traditional education sectors. So I'm very excited for that, because that means we can learn anywhere. And also for full stack in particular, we are growing with a number of university partnerships. And I think it's just showing as another example, different ways that this skill set can be offered and in a broader way, faster for this ramp up period, which is this 2030, which is interesting year where things are supposed to change here.
I love that. Yeah, that's exciting. The fact that universities are sort of making partnerships and it's interesting. I think the next 10 years are going to be pretty awesome. TJ.
Well, I'm excited for post-COVID, primarily in-person networking events to return. But I do also love the fact that virtual networking has become, much more of a, I guess, kind of theme, day in and day out. And, the opportunity to come to an event like this and not just, hear stuff and be at the comfort of your home, but then also hop into the chat and just connect. In-person networking can be really difficult. And so, finding these virtual events can go a really, really long way. Personally, here at Learning Fuse, we are very excited about our data science program. There are a lot of analytics programs out there, and especially here in Southern California, and putting together a program that covers deep learning. It's challenging because, you know, it does require a certain level of knowledge, but I'm excited to see kind of what those students do and what they come out with. And then finally, I need more, you know, bootcamp students, because I have too many employers reaching out. So personally, I'm in a very weird spot right now, which is like trying to wrangle in the people who I haven't heard from in weeks. And I'm like, no, there's literally jobs out there. So with that, you know, said, and as a reminder again, you know, for everybody who's out in the job search, you know, reconnect with the boot camp, reach out to those alumni, you know, circle back to something that maybe you haven't done in a few weeks. But
yeah, no, that's awesome. For those of you on the call, I don't know if everyone knows this, but boot camps have hiring pipeline partners that they work with and establish long-term relationships with. So they're constantly trying to grow that list. And it's a complete like an account executive thing that they do. They're constantly looking at like, you know, their locality and like finding employer partners that would be interested in the talent pool. So yeah, make friends with the faculty. They are interested in getting you hired. And yeah, the data science program is pretty awesome, because I think that that's the next step for boot camps, for tech boot camps specifically. I think there's so many different sectors one can go into. Sorry, I got a weird notification. I think that this meeting has gone way over. Yeah, no, I think that like the bootcamp industry is going to see sort of like a second wave of just aggressive growth, because there's so many niches in tech that one can go into, and you can't capture like in 12 weeks or 3 months a full stack. Like it's a very large ecosystem to capture in such a short period. So thank you for that. All right, Ludo.
I think so for the industry first. I think overall the coding bootcamp industry is really on the right path to really mature. And I think you're going to see the emergence of key players that are really going to take the industry to the next phase, and really kind of address all the concerns that may have been provided in the past. There's a trend as well where it's not just about changing careers anymore. It's really, you know, high school graduates wondering, okay, am I going to go to college, or am I going to do a coding bootcamp next? Which pushes the industry to, you know, get your act together and do the right thing and all that. In that space, when I bring that back to New Camp, we're pretty excited to be launching the complete software engineering bootcamp path. And it's pretty much taking our full stack bootcamp, which is JavaScript, React Native, Node.js, and our Python bootcamp, which is very much centered around the backend, and really bringing that all together in a curriculum that's pretty much, you know, almost a year long, which really for me matches, you know, that new audience that's not just about changing careers, but really first, is it college or is it a coding bootcamp? Is it computer science degree or is it a coding bootcamp? But also starts to address the feedback of, you know, it's too short. I feel like I haven't learned enough. So yeah, we're pretty excited to bring that to the market. And yeah, it's on our website. We just launched it yesterday, actually. So
that's awesome. Congratulations, first of all. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that there's a secondary market that's emerging, which is students right after high school. And I think that, you know, with the political climate, and not just in the United States, this is, I think, across the board. I think COVID has sort of like woken just like all of us, and just seeing the gaps that there are in like traditional education and how it's so tied to, you know, the changing parties and the politics. And I think that is really like student debt is at an all-time high. It's becoming harder and harder to go down the university path. I think I was doing a study when we started doing marketing for Eon, which said that this year is the lowest amount of men in university. I think it was like 70 to 30%, like where men are not, are opting out from going to universities, which is like, I wonder what the greater impact is going to be if we're like pushing men out of academia. And I was having this conversation with my nieces because they're young and I want them to be aware of like, you know, what this means. Like if you want to talk about diversity and equality for women, you want to make sure that the men are present. You can't really have that conversation if you're doing it with people who look like you. So I love all that. All right, guys, we're at the top. We're way past the hour. There's a networking session that has opened up. I think Phil just dropped the link. And I've been getting direct messages to wrap up. I've been ignoring them for like 11 minutes straight. So that this is it. Thank you so much for joining the first session of EON. Ludo, TJ, Trent, really, really, really appreciate you guys coming in. I had a lot of fun. I hope those questions were not too difficult, but I'm, like I said, I'm a big advocate. So it's really hard for me to find like ways to make this tough, but you know, there's still a lot of work to be done. And I'm confident that you guys are gonna make the experience even better.
Thank you, Navi. You were great. We love Min Bin and everything that you guys are doing. So continue.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
A lot of
All right,
fun, guys. Navi,
Take
thank
care.
you so much.
Yeah, see you all in the other session.